This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And on today's episode, we're looking at the armaments of an Astartes in Space Marine 2.
We have a sling swivel, a huge sling swivel. Don't know why. These guys do not use slings as far as I've ever seen.
They do. I can take the opportunity to show something to the camera. See?
Oh, yes. Well, to be fair to me, I did say use slings.
If there are any games or guns you'd like to see on the show, be sure to let us know. And if you have any questions for Jonathan or the Expert Reacts team, leave them in the comments section and they may be answered in a future episode. Right, over to Jonathan. Let's see how long I can resist chiming in about 40k lore.
Reloading weapon.
Well, that looks like a bolter to me.
Bolt rifle now, technically.
So what makes that a rifle, Dave? Can you clue me in there?
The Primaris versions of the bolt weapons, the scale's bigger, they're visually a bit different, and bolt rifle was just, I think, the naming convention to differentiate it from bolter, bolt gun. This is bolt rifle.
I mean, it clearly has a scope fitted to it at the moment with what looks like Picatinny rail sort of in front of the scope mount. So when I saw the rail looking things in the previews and rolled my eyes slightly because I like this sort of traditional 80s not railed aesthetic. But it looks like, at least with this one, they fitted the scope straight to the gun and whatever is in front is some sort of cooling thing or something. Don't know. And we see that great big magazine catch on the right hand side, which looks like it slides down to drop the magazine. And I know Space Marines are kind of genetically engineered hulking guys, but there's no way his finger's long enough to hit that magazine catch. So I need to see the reload to see how he accomplishes that. There's that curved magazine, which I think I mentioned before in the original game. Looks right. Obviously, the old models had the curved mag. I don't know why it would be curved looking at the rounds that we see. It should probably be straight or straighter, at least. Overall, looks very boltery. Doesn't have a stock. So for me, a rifle, however you define it, and who knows whether the balls on these things are rifled or not. I have to watch out for rotating projectiles or not. That could be rocket exhausts, like a gyrojet.
You've said the word. Did a Warhammer video and we've said the G word.
I know. Well, we've been here before, haven't we? But the gyrojet is a rocket projectile gun. But these things have cased ammunition, so it's kind of some sort of propellant charge to get it on its way, and then a rocket assist. So it's like a shoulder-fired, or in this case, hand-fired RPG type system in a way. Bit weird. While I'm at this though, I will just comment on the gigantic front sight. The front sight is more robust than the sight protector. You could literally just have the front sight sticking up like a monolith and you could drop this thing on it and I don't think it would do any damage. Not to mention this doesn't seem to have a rear sight. Maybe it's removed and replaced with the scope. While I'm at the scope, the scope looks very 20th century. There's nothing very sci-fi about it. But it fits with the overall look of the gun.
When I noticed that the rounds are modelled in the magazine, I just immediately thought there's no way the 25 are fitting in there.
That was going to be my next comment, actually. Right, we have a number of issues here. First of all, this looks amazing. That muzzle flash looks great. The gun in motion, the cartridge case ejecting from the gun, all looks cool. But the ejection port is about 50% the size of the cartridge case that's coming out of the gun. It has a very fragile looking, skeletalized cocking handle and a very small ejection opening. The magazine looks like it would fit maybe 5 of those rounds in a single stack. Great big base plate on it as well, which is ribbed for somebody's pleasure. There's quite a bit of detail, though. I always think of bolters being, well, I think of them on the little figures, and people put a lot of detail in, of course. But I think because this is larger than life, kind of filling my screen as I look at it, and there's some good, there are screws, there's wear on it, good bit of texturing. Feels more like a real thing. It's a very obvious thing to say. This is a modern Space Marine game. Of course, it's going to look more like a real gun. But I think it's a challenge for the artist to make it not look just like a cartoon gun. So I think it's kind of industrial and gritty enough to be believable as a weapon of some kind. It's just when you look at it in detail, it's kind of never going to hold up as something that would function in the way that we're familiar with. We've got a reload there, and there's a nicely modeled magazine body with lips. This is kind of unrelated, but it looks a little bit similar. It's not as wide. This is more like a Saiga magazine or something. Very pronounced feed lips on there. No visible follower in the empty magazine to push the rounds up. But way more detail than we've seen in a Warhammer 40K firearm to date. Do we know what that great big hammer-looking thing is on the back of this? And I think some of the other guns.
I don't know specifically what function it serves on the gun.
But it's clearly not involved in the operation of this rifle, and it doesn't move. I don't think it's some sort of sling loop, which would be the other option for something like that. I have to assume that's taken from the figures as well. Okay, this is a fancy bolt rifle with a side saddle mount for some fancy looking rounds as well. Okay, that thing on the back is starting to look like some sort of maybe disassembly, how you disassemble it for cleaning maybe? I'm normally allergic to things like charms, as you know, but I think in this universe, festooning your gun with nonsense feels like almost essential at a certain stage of your career. All right, we've got a great big rotating looking coggy thing on the top. Nice view down the barrel. I can see the projectile down the definitely not rifled barrel, by the way. That's nice. Oh, we've got a shot there with the bolt partially to the rear, having fired a shot. That's cool. The case is already out of the gun, though, before the bolt is fully open. So not only is the ejection port too small, the bolt hasn't even come back far enough to eject the case. So we've got a little bit of fudging going on there. If it's possible to tweak that, that'd be great, but incredibly minor in the scheme of things. Do we know where they're storing their magazines? I know we mentioned that last time.
Yeah, in the lore, they maglock things to parts of their armor. This is why you see the pistol just against the thigh.
That makes sense as far as that goes. However, these guys are equipped with old-fashioned leather pouches, which would be absolutely impossible to manipulate with giant armored gloves on. Very much in the tradition of Batman or Deadpool, they just have great big leather pouches. Well, not necessarily leather. Great big pouches around their waist that never get used for anything. Okay, Batman sometimes get used for things before anyone makes a comment. This thing has that, I think we saw that in Space Marine 1, the sort of drum-type magazine. Almost looks more like a belt box from something like a Stoner, but seems to function more like a drum. There's that big strip of rail-looking stuff on the front again. I've yet to see anything locked onto that. That just seems to be greeblies. This weapon has that rotating cog-type breech, which is interesting.
Well, this is the auto rifle, so its purpose is bigger magazine, higher rate of fire, but it's the auto rifle version that has the spinning piece.
Doesn't seem that much higher than the normal equivalent. I mean, in theory, a great big spinning thing on the top of your gun isn't ideal in terms of getting it caught on things as you move around to prevent it from operating. It does kind of remind me of, I mean, obviously there are rotating breech firearms, like the candidates for the next generation squad weapon. A couple had rotating breeches. The G11 has a rotating breech in the other direction. Kind of reminds me of the old rotary feed on the original Dushka machine gun, but it's pretty different.
Need to reload.
Okay, this is interesting. An underbarrel revolver grenade launcher. That's cool. And it's reminding me very strongly of something that I can't put a name to.
Was it the 612 shotgun?
Ooh, yes, because that was modular. Nice one. Yeah, so that was a design for a revolving shotgun, and you could take off the grip stock entirely and fit it to the bottom of a rifle. Don't know if that's the inspiration here, but there is something like this in the real world. Albeit, I don't know if anyone's actually used it. To be fair, it's the sort of thing someone could have come up with independently, and this might be news to them. The cylinder is fluted like a revolver cylinder, which is interesting. That's obviously a deliberate choice to make it look like a revolving pistol cylinder. I'm guessing the rounds are basically giant bolt gun rounds, or are they more like traditional 40mm rounds?
Yeah, they even bloop.
Yeah, they do. It's a very M79-y bloop we're getting there. It's kind of like having a Milcore grenade launcher on the bottom of your M4 or whatever.
They never learn.
So another admittedly very similar gun here. Now, I'm not going to make that a criticism because I don't think they should be changing too much from the general bolter form factor, because from my limited knowledge, that's kind of your main gun type. So I'd rather see varieties, subtle varieties of that, than whole new weapons that have never been part of the lore before. That's my feeling with stuff that I'm more au fait with. But the one I'm looking at here, yeah, I think they may have been a little too conservative with changing things up, because if you're doing DMR, okay, one school of thought says just slap a scope on it, but we've already had a scope on the normal version, and this doesn't look, maybe it's a slightly bigger scope, so I guess that clues you in a little bit that it's meant to be some sort of precision thing, but it's incredibly short. I think we could have stood to have the same receiver design but with a long barrel sticking out the front, like the original Unreal Sniper weird M16 looking thing. But anyway, something that says this is a marksman's rifle, and a stock, or some kind of nod to a stock, some kind of stabilizing device. I realize that in universe they don't necessarily need a stock, or may not be able to butt it up against their armor even, but I have seen at least one gun in the game that does have a stock. So of all of them to have a stock, it ought to be this, I would have said. With a straight magazine there. There's a slight issue here with that magazine. So we have a witness hole, well, not a witness hole, a window down the side, like a modern PMag or something, to see how many rounds you have. That's fine. We can see that there's a round all the way down at the bottom of the body of the mag. You need a spring to operate the magazine. So what we should, either the window should stop before the bottom and the spring is behind that, or we should be actually seeing the spring there. Unless there's some sci-fi technology that's levitating the rounds up the magazine. We do have something else protruding out the front there at the bottom. Almost looks like a bayonet lug. Don't know what that is. And we have a sling swivel below that, a huge sling swivel. Don't know why. These guys do not use slings as far as I've ever seen.
They do. I can take the opportunity to show something to the camera. See?
Oh, yes. Well, to be fair to me, I did say use slings. I mean, that's got a sling hanging off it. It's a good point, though. They could have modeled a sling attached, just flapping around. We won't get into why he has a chain and padlock wrapped around his arm. I imagine that would impede use somewhat.
I think the thing you pointed to at the bottom is a bayonet lug. It's left over from old pattern bolters. Using a bayonet was much more common in like the Porous Heresy era 30th millennia, where they had bayonets and chainsaw bayonets.
Yeah, so bayonets on DMR type rifles are maybe not common, but they're not uncommon. The original daddy of them all, the SVD, has a bayonet lug, albeit you rarely see them fitted. And it would have been a hell of a bayonet handle, very long weapon. So it's weird that magazine catch is to the rear of the housing there, where you could actually operate it down, but on the one earlier, it was on the front of the magazine well, where you couldn't reach it. Strange. I've yet to see a catch get actuated.
It's hard to see because I took a look in photo mode, and it's all done with their left hand. So they're reaching back into the weapon with their left hand to manipulate the catches.
Not very logical. Reaching round and pulling down on something is really poor ergonomic design.
Well, it's mirrored on the other side of the weapon as well, so it's on the inside too. So they're manipulating it from that side.
Okay, still not sure that an exposed vertically sliding catch is very sensible.
This isn't a very sensible universe.
No, it's true. Actually, it's the opposite of sensible. Now here's where I normally complain about scopes having pointless symbology in them in sci-fi games. I can get behind it in this because we have some inscriptions. Okay, we also have some random numbers that probably don't do anything or mean anything, but we also have some Latin around the edge of the scope.
I just put it into a translator, and if this is accurate, this is rad as hell. It's translated it to "Death to me is art," which for a sniper's weapon,
certain that's what it's meant to say.
That's rad as hell. That goes hard.
Now, what usually happens here, I'm thinking of Event Horizon, among other things, which of course has a loose connection to this universe, kind of, is that someone does a COD Latin translation, and this happened before the internet, but it's even worse now, where you can just slap it in Google Translate, and it spits out something that if you reconvert it, sounds right, or retranslate it, looks right, like this does. But I guarantee you, anyone that knows Latin will be wincing at however that's constructed, because it's never correct. But this is future Latin.
Restocking.
Okay, bolt carbine. Again, it's not clear to me what difference it makes. You can probably tell. Well, I have some stats on the screen, but having played a number of hours, it's probably easier to ask you. How does this feel different to the larger bolt guns?
It feels like it's trying to live in the SMG role, much better in close quarters, higher rate of fire, which sort of makes sense because it's issued to lightweight troops that wear lightweight armor that, you know, specialize in close quarters.
Interesting. Yeah, so again, they've been quite conservative with the weapons design. This just looks like a truncated, larger bolter. The foregrip on the front, I quite like that. That reminds me of, well, a number of things, really. Anything from MP5K to the improvised ones that we get on Car-15s in Vietnam. The fact that it's the same design as the pistol grip, but mounted at the front is reminiscent of those. Because if you don't give soldiers a foregrip, they will improvise one. They did it with the Thompsons in the Second World War. If they got the straight fore end, like as the British issue Thompsons were, they would improvise a grip onto that. AR-15 pistol grips got grafted onto AR-15 handguards, SLR pistol grips onto SLR handguards, etc., etc. But I think this has been designed in. It's maybe mounted a little low on the gun, and very close to the front. There isn't much of a hand stop to stop your fingers getting in the way. But just that alone, shorten it, stick a foregrip on it, you've got yourself an SMG.
To me, Space Marines are perfect for that walking fire doctrine, hip firing a big weapon, walking slowly forward, because they're already armored.
I would expect that to be their primary tactic, actually. Extended line, slowly walk forward while firing at the enemy. Be their own shield wall kind of thing. Okay, Instigator bolt carbine. So this is a variant. Got a great big flash hidery breaky looking thing on the front. There's that shelf again on the front, which we think is some sort of bayonet lug. There's no obvious means of attaching a bayonet to that thing. It just sort of sticks out. Big blocky squared off front on all these guns. The scope here almost looks like a sort of little bit ACOG-y. I'm not sure why it has those vents in the top of the housing.
This one's burst fire as well.
Yeah, higher rate as well. Haven't seen anything super high rate of fire yet, but this is definitely faster than everything else so far. Seems like we're never getting rid of burst fire. Someone keeps thinking it's a good idea. This seems to work pretty well, though. In fact, if anyone can take advantage of burst fire to put maximum firepower on target at a distance, it would be these guys. Generally, it's essentially a workaround for not training your soldiers properly. If anything, you need more practice and skill to use burst fire effectively than you do just automatic, or certainly semi-automatic. Ejection on all these guns is very lethargic. If you contrast that with something like an AK, where it's kicking them into the next zip code, as it were, these things are all sort of lazily trickling out, which makes me concerned about reliability. I guess that's where your machine spirit comes in. Right, a bolt sniper rifle. So the DMR didn't have a stock, the sniper rifle does, although it seems wholly inadequate. It's just a single strut. It doesn't look like it can extend, and it doesn't have a long enough length of pull to... Well, I say that. If it's for nestling against your enormous pauldron, then maybe it could work. Now, I have actually found something that vaguely resembles this, which is actually... Ignore the proper buttstock on this. It's actually a G36 LMG, would you believe? It's actually marked LMG on the side. LMG. And ideally, I think it would probably be used with a drum magazine. This one came to us not with the scope. I added that for this purpose just now. With a jungle clamped magazines, which is a design feature of the G36. I once saw a photo of someone who clamped 6 of these together in an actual conflict zone. No, what we would want to replicate this better is this 10-round mag. There you go. That's not too far off. Best I can do. It almost looks more appropriate if I fold the buttstock. We could find a different buttstock actually and try and dress it up. But you absolutely could use this as not a sniper, but as a DMR. It's just branded an LMG because it's intended for more sustained fire. Although they do melt. So the issue that you may have heard about in the news with G36 rifles, as far as I understand it, wasn't really an issue. With something like this that's meant to put cyclic fire through on a sustained basis, yes, that original design of G36 can melt around the barrel trunnion. The modern G36 has solved that with some aluminium, so not really a problem. And you have to really go to town for that to happen. We're getting a bolt action kind of effect here, but I'm not sure what he's operating. Is he reaching up and operating the bolt?
No, I think it's just a gameplay thing to limit your rate of fire and to make it feel a bit more snipery.
Yeah, which of course it kind of is with modern era game bolt actions, but normally you would build in the cycling. Here, it's like the gun is sort of auto loading, but really slowly, because you hear that chick chick sound. Which is interesting. I don't think we've seen that before. They either get manually operated or they're semi-automatic, and they might constrain the rate of fire some other way, like the recoil. You can't fire till the recoil is settled.
There was a lot to talk about with Space Marine 2, so this episode is actually split into 2 parts. Join us here next week where we'll be talking about weapons like the Melter Rifle, Las Fusil, and Heavy Bolter.